All right, hello once again. Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development program, and in particular the AWD1111 .NET Framework with Web Databases class, I've been going over this series of articles, tutorials, whatever you want to call them, from DotNetOdyessy that's entitled ASP.NET MVC5 Free Course. Now, I'm starting to run into some problems, and I want to let you know in advance why I think at least some of the problems, why I'm running into some of them. All right. We've been asked in this lesson, so we're in Lesson 6. We've gone through Lesson 1, which was our overall view. We've gone through Lesson 2, where we created our first very simple little application. We've gone through Lesson 3, Views and Razors, Lesson 4, Layout, Lesson 5, Model. We're in the middle of Lesson 6 here, talking about the entity framework. So in the last lesson, I went through and we created a brand new project. In that new project, I went into the NuGet Package Manager and I installed the entity framework. All right. Then we created a simple class that represents movie information. As it says, it's a business model class that, at least as of right now, has nothing to do with the entity framework. Then we went in and we added another class, was a movie DB context class that inherited from DB context and basically set this thing up. As it says, we have set everything in order to use DB context API of the entity framework. We just have to interact with that database. So we went into our program.cs file and rewrote main so that it would use this new context. Basically, the idea was it would add a new record to our database. All right, then it said run the application and the movie object will be saved to the database. Well, what happened, just have an FYI for you, is I did come in and I ran the program. All right. Didn't get any error messages. All right. It came up like this, which I believe it just told me, that it had been saved. All right. But, and I'm a little embarrassed here, but I'm just going to tell you the truth. I can't find it in here. Now, you see movies. That does not appear to be the same movies. And the problem with this is I've done a lot of other applications in here, and I've got a lot of other movies. But when I go over to here and I go to properties, it's not showing me anything in here in my properties. All right. There's nothing in here. I can come in here and I can tell it to show all files, and I can tell it to refresh, but there's nothing showing in here, and I couldn't find it in here. And I've spent quite a bit of time looking for it. So I wanted to be able to show you this, and we've done this in class, but I'm not able to right now. All right. So the author says here, is this some form of magic? Yes, but not black magic. It says, let us go behind the curtains and see what has happened. When you use the entity framework, following are the sequence of events that happen. Number one, when you add entity framework to the application, it should add the respective configurations to the app.config. All right, and since we have a console app, it's an app.config. If we were doing a non-console app, it would put it in web.config if it was a web app. All right, so I'm not even sure if that is in there or not. Okay, but I can go in and look in the app.config and see if that's in there. All right, so if we look in app.config, where am I'm in the wrong. Let's see. There we are. Okay. We want to look and find this entity framework. So let's see if it is indeed in there. Well, there's entity framework here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. Just copy it and bring it up inside of Notepad++. Why? So I can take a look at it. I can break it down a little bit and look at it, see what's all in there. You wouldn't normally do this, of course, but I'm doing it like this just so we can see indeed what is in there. All right. So it says, do we have a default connection factory? Yes, right there. Type equals system data entity infrastructure. We've got local DB connection. We don't have SQL connection factory. Could that be it? Of course it could. I'm not sure. All right, then up in here, it's got providers. Invariant name, SQL data client. Type equals system data entity SQL server SQL provider services entity framework.sql server. So that all looks good. The only thing that we have that's different in ours is instead of having this SQL connection factory right there, in ours we have local DB connection factory. And again, I'm not sure whether or not that matters or does not matter. But I'm just going to keep going on. What I'm going to eventually do, and it'll probably be in there as maybe even the first lessons that I have out there, is I'm going to uninstall Visual Studio 2017. And I'm going to do a video on that, and I'm going to install Visual Studio 2019. One of the things that will do is it'll totally clear up, I believe, everything that I've got in that system. In other words, any databases, anything should be gone from there. All right. So it says by default it uses the SQL connection factory as the connection factory. And again, that may have changed over time. All right. It says and SQL client as the provider, meaning that it will use SQL Express if it exists. However, you can override this setting if you want. It connects to the database using Windows authentication. You can verify this by viewing the properties of the database. I did look at that, and mine came up looking like this, except of course it had a different, the server type was actually empty here, and my username was different. My username and my server type, okay, on mine at least, a little hard to see. Whoop, a little too big. All right. So this was the name of mine. All right. Everything else, as I looked through it, appeared to be okay. All right, I'm going to jump into the next chapter, and in the next chapter, I believe, we're going to go back to our project, and when we go back to our project, we will be looking at how to add some CSS and how to add some Twitter Bootstrap to our project to make it look a little bit nicer. All right? I'll be back with that shortly.